All right, today I'm going to chat with you guys a little bit about bench pressing for size. And again, it's not to say that size and strength can be completely separated. And even though I'm a power lifter and this is largely the same technique I use for competition, I also choose not to try to cut range of motion a lot. I try to just get as strong as possible, which means we've got to get as big as possible. So through these few sets that I'm going to repeat, you're going to see me doing some rep work with 335, 315, things like that. What you're going to notice is a reoccurring pattern in the way that I do things. Number one, I run my pinkies just inside the rings. So when you look at where the bar touches on my chest, I want you to watch all those reps. What's one of the things that you're going to notice? That my forearms are stacked. Okay, this is kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big deal. My forearms and wrists are stacked, which means when I'm at the bottom of the movement, if you guys watch anytime I pause on the chest, the bar is directly above my wrist bone. My wrists are not cocked back, right? They're cocked back very minimally. That bar is all the way over my wrist bone. It's not in my palms. You'll also notice that I'm stacked in such a way so that where I touch the lower chest, my elbows tuck, and you're going to notice that I actually go into a very deep position. In other words, there's minimal flaring in terms of the angle of my forearm. It is almost 90 degrees from the ground. It's not splayed in or out very much. All right, the reason for that, it puts a deeper stretch on the pectoral. Okay, so again, you'll always see a lot of people who will say silly stuff like, well, the bench press is not a great chest exercise. Bench press is a phenomenal chest exercise if you know how to perform it. All right, the key here, notice that the way that I bench, it goes into a pretty good lengthened position on the chest. My chest muscles get stretched at the bottom. You notice I usually briefly pause on the chest, okay? I don't bounce it. All right, so what do we get from all of these things? All right, if you look at that wrist stacking that's occurring, it's putting the chest into a deeper stretch. Because I don't use any momentum to bounce it off the chest, what has to do the work getting moving out of the bottom? Well, the pecs. And it makes them work harder. And if you pause at all, and really my higher rep work, I like to do a lot more pausing. Okay, when you pause, it forces the chest to work a little bit harder. It has to get the weight moving from a lengthened position, a stretched position. All right, if you look at all the research that's out there, what do we find repeatedly? Long positions, positions where the muscle is stretched as long as that exercise loads tension, because there are machines and things that will remove that tension at that point. But in the case of this movement, like a bench press, you can't unload that tension. The bar is sitting right there. All right, it's pressing down on you. There's no machines, no cables, nothing to release it or to change the angles. You have the most mechanical tension at the bottom. Okay, so that's a big deal, touching the chest and coming to a stop on the chest. That is important because, again, making the chest work hardest in the position that has the most muscle growth, which is that stretch position at the bottom when the chest is lengthened, not the contraction at the top. Okay, that's an old kind of bodybuilder myth that when it's been studied, the contracted position, not really that important for muscle growth. I'm not saying it doesn't ever do anything. In some studies, it doesn't. But what you usually find is that if you're technically going to skip anything, it's usually those lockouts. You can get away with skipping and still see maximal muscle growth. Skipping anything out of the bottom, that hurts your muscle growth. You want that stretch, and so therefore we don't bounce, okay? So what are we doing here? We're forcing the muscle to work hardest. We're putting it into the lengthened position because of our grip width, okay? Putting that stretch on it, and it's a moderately wide grip, because if we go too wide, the shoulders get more work. But right about where I'm at, notice that. Good balance. Now, if I go out wider, the delts take over a little bit out of the bottom. Well, then it's more shoulders. Well, that's obviously not what we want to build a big chest, nor is bouncing, nor is skipping the bottom. So the wrist stacking part, okay? The other thing, scapula stay back. Guys, I want you to notice it when I bench. Watch the lockouts. At the lockouts, my shoulders don't roll forward. We keep the scapula retracted. Because what's the other thing that happens? If the scapula get protracted at the top, it's harder to get back into that Lincoln position at the bottom because you've got a heavy weight on top of you. You've got your body weight, everything pressing down on that bench. If those scapula come apart, what happens? It's very difficult to retuck them because you've got weight there that you have to squish back under, right? Your body weight plus the weight of the bar pressing down. It's more difficult to get them back into position. So we have to keep those scapula retracted, which means when we unrack the bar, we have to let it settle. You don't just drop out of the top. Notice that when I unrack it, I bring it up over I bring it all the way out, take a deep breath, make sure my scapula are locked in before we lower it. We let the bar settle. You have to let the bar settle. And it allows you to maintain that position so that we get that Lincoln position at the bottom. Okay? All right. Another big deal. Particularly for chasing chest size, you need a little more reps. Not saying lower reps don't work the chest, they do. But in this case, the lowest you're really seeing me go is 5 for this, and that's pushing it. Usually on those weights that I can only do 5, like a 335 there, without getting too close to failure, I don't do as many of those. Okay. Very rarely. I try to not go under about 8 on the sets that I want to get the most growth from. And then a lot of times I drop down to do 10s and 12s and things. Again, rep range matters. So recap, we're going to bench for size. Trying to get bigger, what do we need to do? Moderately heavy weight, right? Not always your all-out maxes. We need those wrists stacked. We need those forearms real close to 90 degrees and we're at the bottom, usually even with elbow tuck, so that we put the most stretch on the chest. We need to come to a stop at the bottom. We don't bounce the weight off your chest. Okay. We keep the scapula retracted. And part of keeping the scapula retracted is to let the bar settle. When you unrack it, you get that bar all the way over your lower chest. You take a deep breath. Make sure those shoulder blades are pulled in together before you lower it. Okay, and by doing that, we help maintain that. And if we do all of this, it's going to put more size on your chest. Okay, it's also in a lot of ways going to give you the potential for a bigger max, even if you use a slightly different style to max on. Why? Well, because bigger muscles have more strength potential. Now, you may want to practice whatever technique you use that's different. Right? You may want to practice that before you max. But you're not going to go wrong even with this, right? You're always going to be, if you've built a lot of size using this sort of grip width and setup, you're still going to be pretty strong at it. All right, I mean, I'm doing 315 for sets of 8. Probably fair to assume based on this, I'm decently strong even in this position for a max. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.